Hey guys, and welcome to this inventory pickup system. In this tutorial, we will be taking a look at how to add new pickups to your inventory, how to make the inventory. If I go ahead and play the game here and press tab, I have the inventory here where I put all my items that I want to store, and then I have other sort of inventories where I can have a primary weapon, a secondary weapon, pistol, and melee weapon. And of course, all these are pretty much the same. It's just that each inventory or container, here we call them containers, each container has like certain properties that define its behavior. For example, what other containers can interact with this container, what are the items that we can put in this container. For example, if we have a pistol in our inventory here and we want to like equip it to the primary weapon, we cannot. For example, let me pick up a pistol right here and I set it so that it auto equip. But if I put this pistol in our inventory and if I try to equip it to the main or like the primary slot, it's not gonna work. It's only gonna work for the pistol, and I'm going to show you this later. But essentially we can define what container can interact with other containers. Now, of course, we can pick up items here, for example, an apple, and it gets added to the inventory. And we mark this apple as stackable, which means that if we pick up more than one, they stack in the same slot. Now, as you can see here, we have many slots, and in the properties, we can select how many slots. But if we pick up another item, such as a pistol, if I add another pistol, it's not going to stack. It's going to take another slot for that pistol because it's not stackable. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the widget. We're going to create our own inventory later, but for now let's just take a look at this already made inventory. So let's go ahead and open the inventory, and here, so this inventory right here, it's a item container, or the widget items container. If we go here and look for container, we have the items container. So basically this is a items container, and here in the settings we define or like select the properties for that container. Now we have this container with the ID 1, and this is just another container for the primary slot, which has the ID 1 and max slots for 1, because we only need one slot for our primary weapon, whereas here we have 40 slots, and of course we can add more if we want, like 60 slots for example. And compile, we're gonna have more slots. In the other settings, we have the supported item types. Basically, what items can we put in that container? Here we selected none, which means we want everything to be like everything is supported. Whereas, for example, the primary weapon here, we have 4 supported items. We support rifles, SMGs, shotguns, and grenade launchers. So basically, we cannot put an apple or anything else there because it's a primary weapon, and we want a primary weapon put there. Same thing for the secondary slot, but for the pistol, as you can see, we only support pistols, and the other settings are pretty much just the visual settings, such as the background color, the slot size here, and slot padding. These settings can be customized depending on your needs. Of course, the slot image, the default slot image, if you wanna display something else, here we have a gray color, a dark gray color as the background. You can, of course, you can change it to something else or set a image. We also have a hotkey setting here where we can show a hotkey. As you can see here, we have 1. This is hotkey 2, 3, and 4 for the melee. And one very important settings is the accept drop from container ID. So this basically defines what container can interact with other containers. For example, our main inventory can accept drops from, this is basically when you drag and drop something. So for example, if we play here, let me show you this in game. If I pick up this pistol right here and then like I drag and drop over the inventory, as you can see, we can add the items there. Now if I go ahead here, if I select this inventory right here and go to the accept drop from container ID, now the pistol slot has the ID 3. Now if I go ahead and remove this 3, let's just go ahead and change it to 7 for example. 7 doesn't exist, so So now if we go ahead and play, you're going to notice that if we try and put our pistol now in the inventory, you're going to notice that it doesn't work because the main inventory, or at least the container with the ID 0, can no longer interact with the pistol slot, which has the ID 3. Now, if I want the pistol slot to interact with the container 0, or main inventory, if you want to call it that, we can simply, like 3 here. If I added another container, I can simply add it here, and it will be able to interact with this container. Same thing for pistol here. We have an accept drop from container 0. So basically, when I drop from the inventory into the pistol slot, I set it so that it accepts that drop from container 0, or like ID 0. So each container needs its own ID. So here we have our container with the ID 0. This has ID 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Now, before we make our own inventory, let's go ahead and take a look at the pickup system. We want to add a new pickup, and I want to explain how you can implement this pickup system in your pickup blueprint if you already have one made, or if you want to start from scratch. Everything should work just fine. Now, if we go to the system here and then data, we have a data table. So the pickup system uses a data table where you can store pretty much whenever you want to add a new item, you can add it here, give it an ID. So each pickup will have its own ID, and basically the pickup uses the pickup component. I'll show you what the pickup component does later, but for now, each pickup has its own ID, and whenever we add a new pickup, of course, we get to choose the ID, what type, and of course, we have the status dropped. And if it can stack, here we have, for example, ammo. So essentially, each item will have certain properties that define the behavior of that item when we pick it up. The pickup system uses 2 blueprints. The first one is the pickup component. This pickup component has some functions that handle the pickup information, and more importantly, the ID. So basically, the pickup component is going to use the data table to get the information about that pickup based on the ID. For example, if we go here to example and then pickups right here, we have a main class. So normally you should have a main class, like a main pickup class, as the parent, where you're going, of course, to implement the things that apply for every pickup. And then you have, whenever you want to add a new item or pickup, you want to create a child out of the main class. Now, if I open up the main class, I have the pickup component. Now, whenever I create a child out of this class, they will inherit the pickup component, and we can, of course, customize it based on that pickup. So here we have the pickup component for the main class, and whenever I create another class, for example, ammo, the ammo child, and then let's go ahead and open the editor. And as you can see, this is a child of the main class, and it also has a pickup component. But if we select the pickup component here, we have a ID. So this ID will be, of course, different for each pickup. Here we have ID 3. Now, if we go to the data table right here, we can see that ID 3 is ammo, and of course, these are the information about that pickup. Now, this pickup component is going to go to the data table, use that ID, and grab all the information needed about that pickup. And of course, whenever we make another pickup, of course, we need to change the ID. For example, ML2, we have a different ID. Now, if we go ahead and select the pickup component here, we have an ID 4 because it's a different pickup. The second important thing is the interface. So we have a pickup component which defines or like handles the pickup information. And then we have a pickup interface which handles the interaction when you want to pick up that item from the ground. Of course, we have the pickup interface to handle that sort of communication. So essentially, whenever you make a new pickup, so normally you would go to your main class here. If you go to pickup here and you want to create a child so that it inherits everything that the main class has. But let's suppose that you don't have a pickup yet and you want to make a new pickup. So we can, for example, come here, right click blueprint class, for example, just a simple actor, and we can like call it my main class. And then we can open that up. And of course, the two most important thing is add the pickup component so we can handle the pickup information. Now that we have a pickup component, we want to implement the interface. So we can go to class settings here and then to interface, and we want to add that pickup interface. So these are the two important things about our main pickup class. Let's go ahead and add a static mesh. So in my example, I use line trace to pick up items. For this example, let's go ahead and use a sphere collision so that when we overlap the pickup, we want to add it to the inventory. So I'm going to add a sphere collision to our pickup right here. And let's just go ahead and do hidden in game, change that so we can see it in game. I'm going to uncheck that. Now we can close this main class. In fact, let's go ahead and rename that my main pickup class. So this is our main pickup class, and from this class we want to make our other pickups. For example, we want to add an orange, so we can right click on this main pickup and then create a child blueprint class, and we can, for example, make my orange pickup. And I want to open that up, and of course, as we can see, it inherited everything that it needs, the pickup component, and it has the interface. So let's go ahead and change the static mesh to something like our ball mesh, change the size, change the texture to. So now what we need to do is give it an ID, but we need to add an entry to the data table. So we'll go to the data table here, and we can see that we have an ID 8 as the last ID. We can add a 9 for our orange pickup. So we're gonna click here on the plus sign here, and we're gonna give it an ID of 9. And this is very important. You want to go to the row name here and give it ID 9 as well, or at least number 9 there. Now we can go back to the orange pickup here, and we need to select the pickup component and go to the ID here and give it the same ID so that it goes to the data table and find the information about this pickup right here. So pickup component has the ID 9. It's gonna get it from the data table, and now we can enter the information related to this orange pickup. For example, what's the type? We can we have healing item 1 for our apple here. Let's select healing item 2, and of course, if you want to add a new item, you just go to the item type enumeration and add your own pickup. Now for the status, it's going to be by default dropped. We're gonna make it so that it stacks on our inventory if we pick up more than one item. So let's go ahead and enable that. Now for on pickup, this is basically, this drives the logic of your game. So we're gonna say on pickup, let's go ahead and destroy that actor. For the equip to bone, we don't care about that. For the amount, we're gonna leave it to 1, and for the weight, let's select something like 45 or 45. For the name, let's go ahead and name it orange, and for our description, let's just go ahead and do a nice orange. For the inventory image, here we want to select what image we want to display in our inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and select the orange image. The unique ID is something that's going to be used by the server to differentiate between each item in the inventory, because a server doesn't have a widget, so we need something like an array to store our pickups. For the pickup class here, let's go ahead and select the pickup class that we just made, which is the my orange pickup. So my orange pickup is going to be the pickup class. Now this is all we need as far as the data table goes. Of course, the important thing here is the ID. It needs to be the same or entered in the pickup component, and make sure that the ID is unique to this pickup item. We don't want another item to have the same ID. So if we go to the orange here, pickup component, it has the ID 9. Let's go ahead and add our orange pickup here to the world, and let's just make a duplicate. Let's go ahead and duplicate more, and now what we need is our inventory, and for that we're going to create a new inventory just to show you the customizations we can do. So here, let's go ahead and do a user interface widget blueprint, and we can call that my pickup inventory, for example. And let's go ahead and open that up. And here, what we want to add is we want to add the inventory or items container. So I want to call containers or items container. I want to add that here, for example. And here we can select the properties about this container. So the ID is going to be ID1, and for the maximum slots, let's go ahead and do like something like 30. For the supported items, we want it to be to support everything, so we'll leave that to a none, or we can just remove this. Just if we keep it empty, then it supports everything. Let's go ahead and add a inventory background. This handles dropping an item from the inventory. This is when you want to drop it to the ground, so you want to use an inventory background. This is very important to handle, like I said, dropping an item from your inventory. So we can handle the events that comes from this inventory or from that action. So let's go ahead and add a inventory background. Let's make sure that it's here, the first element. Let's make sure that it takes the entire screen. So we're gonna go to anchor, and want to hold control and anchor it so that it takes the entire space. Of course, this is going to be hidden by default, so don't worry about that. So make sure that the inventory background is the first item, and then the item container. You can add as many containers as you want. For example, maybe we want to add a container that supports like orange items. Let's go ahead and add a new container right here. I want to add it here, for example, this container. Let's make it a small container, for example, here. Or like here, just make it closer. Let's give it an ID. This is very important. We want it to have a different ID. So this has ID 0. This is going to have ID 1. And for the max slots, let's pick something like 5. For the supported item types, we want it to support our orange pickup. So if we go to the data table here, let's just get the item type. So pickup data. So our orange pickup is of type healing item 2. Now again, if you want to add more items, just go to the type enumeration right here, pickup type, and add more types. So I wanted to support the healing item 2. So I'm gonna go ahead here, select the container, and I want to change this. I want to add or change this to item healing item 2. Now it supports healing item 2. I can add more items if I want, but for now let's just go ahead and do delete. So it supports our orange pickup, which is of type healing item 2. Now if I drag from the inventory of ID 0 to the orange type, it's going to trigger the event for that, and we can handle it. So for now, let's go ahead and add this widget to our viewport when we press, for example, Tab or E. So I'm going to use the other character, which has nothing. I'm going to go back to a character here, and I'm going to use this third-person character 2. And I'm going to just change the word settings here. So default pawn class is going to be our character 2. I'll just make sure that nothing is in there. That's pretty good. Now let's go ahead and open the character, and I'm going to handle the event begin play, and I want to create that widget. Now the name of the widget is my pickup inventory. So let's go ahead and create a widget, and it's going to be my pickup inventory. This is going to be our main widget for the inventory. Let's go ahead and right click to the return value, and want to promote that to a variable. So promote to a variable, and I'm going to name it my inventory, for example. So my inventory. So that's our inventory. Let's go ahead and add it to the viewport. Let's add it to the viewport, and let's go ahead and change the visibility. Of course, you can add it to the viewport later, or this is just my preference to add it to the viewport and set it to collapse. So set visibility to collapsed. Now I'm gonna handle the tab key. So When I press tab, I want to add the inventory to the viewport, and when I press again, I want to remove the inventory from the viewport. So I'm gonna get that inventory, and I want to do is visible. So if it is visible, I want to hide it. If it's not, I want to show that widget. So if it's true, I'm going to do set visibility to collapsed. If it's not, I'm going to set the visibility to visible. So I'm going to do visible right here. And now if I play and of course hit tab, I can see my inventory, but I need to enable the mouse. And let's go ahead and do that. Now when it's visible, I'm going to get the player controller and show the mouse. So show mouse cursor. Let's go ahead and set that to true. And the same thing here. Here we want to hide it. So now if we play, we should be able to, of course, communicate with our inventory here. Maybe we should have added more slots to the end, maybe +2. But for the time being, we want to overlap our pickup here, and we want to add them to the inventory. So we need to find a way to return or get these containers references. So I want to go to the my pickup inventory right here, and this is going to be our container. The first one, we're going to rename that to main container. This is basically our main container where we're going to put everything else, everything that we want to stock. As for the other container, we can rename it to orange container, for example. So this is a container where I only want to add, like, put oranges there. So now let's go ahead and make a function, and we're going to name it get container by ID. So this function is going to return the container based on the ID. Let's go ahead and select that function, make it pure. And here we have the main inventory, or main container, sorry, which has the ID 0, and then the orange container has the ID 1. So we can do, for example, well, let's go ahead and add an input, and it's going to be of type integer, and the name ID. Now we can make a switch on int, and let's go ahead and add 2 pings for the time being, of course, because we only have 2 containers. Let's just handle 2. For the ID 0, I want to return the main container. So let's make a return, and let's rename that. Let's go ahead and change the output here to a single container. And for the name, it's just going to be container. So when we when we call this function with the ID 0, I want to return the main container. And when I call it with the ID 1, I want to return the orange container. So return, and by default, we're going to return nothing. So basically, when I call this function and give it the ID 1, I want to return the orange. If not, then I want to return the main container. So we're going to use this function to get the container, or one of the containers, to use them in our game. So for example, I can get the inventory here, and then get container. We can call get container by ID. For example, ID 0 would be our main container, and then if I want to add a new item, I can simply do add new item. So this is going to be triggered to add a new item. So let's go ahead and make that into a custom event so that we can call it from our orange pickup. So custom event, name it add inventory item. So let's go ahead and hook that there. Here we need the item, so let's go ahead and select that inventory. And I'm going to go to details here, and I'm going to add a input. So let's just call it the item. For the type here, depending on your pickup, you can set it to be an actor or of your or the type of your main class. So let's just go ahead and make it the type of our main class. So my main pickup class. So it's going to be my main pickup class. and then that's the item. So the first thing I want to do here is make sure that this item here implements the interface we have. Now, if you remember, like I said, there are two very important things about our system pickup, which is the pickup component and then the pickup interface. The pickup component handles the pickup information, and the pickup interface handles communication. For example, we have a couple functions here: get information, you get the information about that pickup, get the name count, get the status, and update the count. So this interface is very important to handle or to communicate with that pickup and tell it what to do. So we need to make sure that this item right here implements that interface. So just drag a pin and do implement interface. So I want to make sure that it does implement our interface. So for the interface, it's going to be our pickup interface. And if it's true, then we can, of course, proceed. Now, let's go ahead. Now, we're going to use our interface here and get the information about this pickup. So we want to drag from this item and get info. So as you can see, this is a message which indicates that it's a interface function. So we want to execute that function on this pickup because it does implement our interface. And this function will return the information about that pickup. Now, this information can be found in the data table, and this is why we use the pickup component, which handles this part right here. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that this pickup is actually can be picked. So in our data table, we have a status here, dropped. So drop basically means it's on the ground, we can pick it up, and there's like an inventory, equipped, destroyed. So I want to make sure that it's actually dropped so we can pick it up. So let's go ahead and do break from that information returned. Let's go ahead and do hide and connected pins, and we want to get the status only. So we want to make sure that it's dropped. So if it equals to dropped, then in that case, we want to add the item to the inventory. Now, if it's true, we want to get the container thanks to the function we created earlier in our pickup inventory. And we're going to give it ID 0, and it's going to return the main container, which is this one right here. So we want to add our pickup here, our orange pickup, to this main inventory, or like container of ID 0. So we got the container. Now we want to add this item to the inventory. So we want to give it the information. And the slot type is going to be in inventory, basically in our main inventory. Now here, this is the slot type. You can add your own slot types in the enumeration, but for our purposes here, we have a inventory slot, and we have primary, secondary, pistol, etc. So this is pretty much all we need to do. We can, of course, based on the action, let's go ahead and get the on pickup right here, and let's make sure if it is destroy, we'll destroy our pickup here. And so if on pickup equals destroy, for example, destroy, let's just go ahead and destroy the pickup. Now destroy actor, if it's true. And obviously you can, of course, handle the other one, hide, we can hide the item, but for now, as soon as we pick up the item, we want to destroy it. So now we need to call this event from our pickup right here, so the orange pickup. So in our orange pickup, we need to call that event. So first, I'm gonna select the static mesh, and I want to ignore the pawn when I collide with the pawn. So I'm gonna set this to custom, and for the pawn, we're gonna ignore it. As for the sphere, which we're going to use for collision, we're going to make sure that it does overlap the pawn. In fact, we can simply do custom here. We can ignore everything and simply overlap the pawn. And now we can right click on the sphere, go to the add events, and we want to add on component begin overlap. And here we have our event right here. When we overlap the orange or the pickup, let's make sure that the actor that overlap this orange is actually our character. So we want to cast to the third person character, and our case is the third person character too. And if it's successful, you want to call the event. So add new item. You want to call add inventory item, and for the item, we're going to give it self. So again, we just handle the overlap event, cast to our character, and then call the add inventory item. And in the item, we want to pass self, because this blueprint is the orange pickup, or a pickup in general. Now, before we continue, I forgot one very important detail is about the interface. Now, it's true that we added the interface to our main pickup class right here, which is the my main pickup class. We added the interface and the pickup component, but we did not handle the functions of the interface. So in my blueprint here, we have update count, update status. These are the interface functions, and we need to handle them in our main class. So let's go ahead and double click on update count, and we need to return something here. And in these functions, you simply need to call or use the pickup component right here, and just call pretty much the same function. So update count, we're just gonna call the same function, or a similar function, update count, and we're gonna give it the new count right here, and then return to true or updated. And the same thing for the update status. We're gonna get the pickup component and call update status, or like update pickup status, and we're gonna give it the status, and just return true. And the same thing for the get name and count. Again, just get the pickup component, and get name plus count is the function. Is the function in the pickup component. Just go ahead and hook that there. And finally, get information, which is a very important function. Get the pickup component and get pickup info, and then just hook that there. Now again, when you implement the interface in your main pickup class, you actually need to handle the functions. Update count, you need to use the pickup component and then get the update the count. And then of course the status, the same thing, get the pickup component, update pickup status, and give it the status from the interface. Same thing for get name and count and get info. And of course, because you did it in your main class, you don't have to do it in the child classes, because it's handled automatically. Now if we play, we should be able to pick up our item, or orange pickup, and as you can see, we added it to the inventory, and with the hover automatically handled. And of course I can like move it around here, for example. That's automatically handled. And we're gonna pick up the other things. And as you can see, because they're marked as stackable, it stacks in the same slot. So now what we want to handle is dropping the item. As you can see, it automatically handled for you. Now as soon as you drop it here, thanks to the background inventory we added to the widget, as soon as we drop it here, we get a amount text box. We can, for example, select 2 and click confirm, and then we need to handle that event. And the same thing if I want to put this orange item here in our orange container. So we'll handle that next. So the first thing we want to do is handle the orange pickup, and we want to add it here, and then of course do the opposite, add it from the orange container into the main container. And then the second thing we want to handle is dropping the orange to the ground. Now we want to handle the drop item, basically when you want to drop the pickup from the inventory and just drop it in the ground, or you want to drag and drop, basically moving our orange pickup, for example, into our orange container. So let's go ahead and handle that. So in our character, let's go ahead and create a custom event, and let's just call it handle events. Let's go ahead and call this on the begin play. So in the begin play, we will make a sequence. After we create the widget, we want to call handle events. So basically we want to handle the drag and drop events and the drop request. So let's go ahead and get the containers. So I'm gonna get my inventory. I want to get both containers. So get container by ID. So we'll get the first container, and we want to handle. So we want to look for bind. So here we have 3 binding events. So basically, when we drag and drop an item from a container to another container, we want to handle that. This is the event that triggers it. So we can handle it here. We have a mouse button down. We can handle that as well to consume items, for example. Same container. This is when we move the item from one slot to another. But for our example here, we want the drag drop container over container. So let's go ahead and select that. And from here, we want to drag a ping, go to add event, and let's add a custom event, and we're gonna call it drag drop, for example. So we want to bind that event for the container 0, which is the main inventory, and we want to do the same thing for the other container as well. So we'll copy paste here, and for this time we're gonna give it the ID 1, and we want to bind the same event. So a bind drag drop, and we'll use the same event for both. So basically, when you drag and drop either from the inventory to the container 1, which is the orange container, let me go ahead here. So if you drag an item, for example, from here to here, then you want to handle that, or the opposite, from here to here, you also want to handle that. So that's why we binded both events for both containers. So here, this events is basically the event that we're going to handle, and this gives us information about what container triggered that event. For example, container receiver is the container that received the item. So if I drag the item from from here to here, then the receiver would be the orange container, sorry. And if I drag the item and dropped it over the inventory of ID 0, then this container will be the receiver. So here in our character, to verify if we dropped from the inventory to the orange container, we could simply say if a receiver equals to 1, and that would mean that we dropped from the main inventory to the orange container, and that's what we want to do. So if it's true, then we want to move those oranges to the orange container. So if it's true, we have the item reference here, but in our case, the item has been destroyed, so it would be null, but we can use the slot index to determine what item we're talking about here. So if it's true, I'm going to get the second container, or the orange container, and I want to add a item. So I want to add an item here, and I can use the same container to get the info about the index or about the slot. So get info, so get pickup info by slot index, and so that's what I want to use here. So I pretty much just want to move that item to the other container. So for the slot index, I already have that. So that's going to be the from container, because I dragged and dropped from the main inventory. So I'm going to take that slot index from the from container. So that's the slot that I want to get the information from, and I'm going to add a new item. So I want to add the new item to my orange container, and then I want to remove this item from the main inventory. Now I can just simply, again, just get the main container, and I want to do clear slot. So clear slot this to empty a specific slot, and again we have the slot index. Everything comes with the event sent by the event drag and drop. So we can simply clear the same slot of the from, because from basically where it came from the main inventory. So now the main inventory no longer has those oranges because we added them to the orange container. Now this should do it, but the most important thing is that we want to make sure that both containers can interact with each other. So if we go back to the My Pickup inventory, if we select the main inventory or main container, we have accept drop from container. This basically, as I talked about it like at the beginning of the video, it defines what containers we can accept drag and drop operations from. So here, this is ID1, so I want to make sure that I add this container so that we can now drag and drop and, of course, trigger those events. Now I'm going to tell it, hey, accept drop from container ID1, and the same thing for orange container. It's going to accept drop from container 0, which has the ID 0. Now this guy is going to accept the drops from that container. With this, they should be able to interact with each other, and here again this event is going to trigger when I drag and drop over one of them, basically from the main container into the orange container, or the orange container to the main container. Here we verify if ID equals to 1 for the receiver, which means that it's a orange container. This means the orange container received the drop, which means we want to put those oranges from the main inventory into the orange container. And then of course we want to get the information from the main container, not the orange. So this should be the main container actually. So we will get the information because it's coming from the main container. Then the main container has the information about that item. So we want to get the container 0, which is the main container, get the information about that pickup, and then add it to the orange container. And after we add it, we want to get the main container once again and clear that slot, because now we added those orange items to the orange container. Now we should be able to play. Let's go ahead and add those orange items to our inventory, and now we should be able to drag and drop them here. And as you can see, now they should be we cleared the slot. Now we no longer have those orange. Now if you want to move just the half or something like that, you can simply modify the information here. You can, for example, you can just drag here, make pickup info, and you can simply copy all the information except for the amount. Now instead of clear slot, you could do update count if you only want to move half the amount or a specific amount. So let's go ahead and do update count by ID, and we could, instead of clear slot, we could simply do this update count and new amount. Just set it just to 1, for example. And for the unique ID, we should set a unique ID when we added the item, but for our purposes, let's just get the same. Let's just get the ID from here. So I'm gonna go ahead and hide all the pings, get the unique ID only, and put it there. Now don't forget to connect the info here. It's very important. Of course, for the unique ID, we need to set that up when we add the item. So we added the item here, and for the unique server ID, let's just go ahead and do a random integer. For example, a random integer in range is going to be from 0 to like 10,000, for example. So that's our unique server ID. And now let's not also forget to specify the unique server ID, which we'll get from the same struct. Now we should be able to, instead of clearing the slot, we'll leave only one item in there. So let's go ahead and test now, and let's go ahead and pick up these oranges. And now if I move everything here, you can see that we have 4 here and we only have 1. But of course, this is just to show you that you can update the count of a certain item. So that's pretty much how you would update a count for a certain item. So let's go back to clearing the slots. So we want to move everything. And now let's go ahead and handle the opposite. Basically, you want to move what we have in our orange container to our main inventory. And the way to do that is pretty much just the same thing, except for the other container. So here Basically, if the receiver is 1, which means we dropped from the main inventory to the orange container. Now we want to do the opposite. If it's false, it means that we want to drop from the orange container towards the main main container. So now for the other way around, we could simply copy here, copy paste, and then just if it's false, then it means we want to do the reverse. So it's going to be the same thing. We're going to get it from slot index 2, which is the from, basically where it came from. We're going to get the information from there, and the container is going to be of course, we know that it's the orange container, so it's ID 1, so we want to get the information from there, and then use that information to add the item to the main inventory, which should be 0, and we want to add that there. And then we want to clear the ID 1, which is the orange container, and now we should be able to do it in both ways. So basically add the items here, and then of course add the items here, for example. And of course here you're gonna notice that if I put it here, for example, and then like let's say I want to put it here, for example, it does not. It goes to the first slot, and that's because of this slot index right here. You want to verify or give it where you want to put it, and that comes with the event itself. So this can be hooked here in the other slot index, and the same thing for here in the other slot index, where for the receiver, basically. Now we should be able to play, and if we pick these oranges, we can, for example, drop it on the second slot, and as you can see, we can drop it there, and we can do the opposite, and of course pick whatever slot we want, for example here, and it would be added there. Now let's go ahead and handle the other event, which is dropping the item to the ground, depending on how much we want to drop. Now this event comes from the inventory background. Now if we go back to the my pickup inventory widget, we have a inventory background. Now this inventory background handles the drop, like when you want to drop an item, and it shows you this amount if you have more than one, and then you can either confirm or change the amount that you want to drop, or cancel. And then when we confirm, we're going to trigger an event that we will handle here in the character. We're going to do the same thing here in this widget. We want to return the inventory background so we can handle that event. So here we have get container. We want to make another function, and we want to do get background inventory. Let's just call it get background. So here we're going to simply return the inventory background. So I'm just going to do this, and that's what we want to return, so we can access it and handle whatever we want. So this is of course in the inventory widget. Now in the character, we handled the drag drop container over container, and now we want to handle another one. So we'll get the inventory, and I want to get the background container. It's not a container, it's just a background inventory. So get background, and this is going to return the background. Let's just move this here, just get some space, and we want to bind. So let's just look for bind, and we have a drag drop from a container. So here we will do pretty much the same thing. We want to bind this event and get the a pin from here, add event, and then add custom event. Let's just call this event drop item. Now this drop item tells you what container requested that. For example, I want to drop the item from the orange container or the main container. And of course, it gives you the unique server ID, gives you the slot status and the amount. Now let's go ahead and handle dropping an item from the main container. Now, of course, you can simply verify what container is this. So if it's 0, then obviously we want to drop the item from the main inventory. And in this case, we want to get the amount of the current item. So we want to make sure, are we dropping everything or only a specific amount? So we can get the container. Again, we can use the same method, my inventory, get container. You want to get information about this item that we want to drop. So we want to get item info by unique ID. So we already have the unique ID here, so we can just give it there. Now we got the item information. Now we can verify if we want to drop everything or not. So this is the info. The first thing we want to do here is verify if we have enough. So break. We want to get the amount of this item. So let's just go ahead and hide everything and show the amount. And we want to make sure that the amount here is we want to make sure that the amount is either smaller or equal to the amount that we have in our inventory. Now if that's true, that means we can drop either everything or the specified amount. So if it's true, we can simply get the container. Now we want to update the count. Now if the count is 0, it's going to be removed automatically. So let's go ahead and do update count by ID. And now the ID is going to be the unique server ID that we will get here. So this does work for single player as well. So we want to get this unique server ID, and of course the new count is going to be how much we want to drop, or like the amount that we have in our inventory minus the amount that we want to drop. So we're going to do this amount right here minus the amount that we want to drop, which is this amount right here. And that's going to be the remaining item that we're going to have in our inventory. Now, either it's going to be something or 0. If it's 0, the item is going to be removed from the inventory. So let's go ahead and start. Of course, this handles the main inventory, and you would do the same thing for the other container. Now, if I want to drop, for example, 4, you're going to notice that I no longer have that item. Now, of course, we can also drop only a specific amount, less than the maximum amount. So we can say 2, and here we're going to have 2 remaining, and we can, of course, drop more, 1, for example, and now we only have 1, and now we can drop the remaining 1. And as you can see, we didn't get the how much you want to drop because it's only 1, so automatically we drop that one. Obviously here you might want to spawn the orange, so you can simply get the class, pickup class right here, and just do spawn actor from class, and you can just simply spawn that actor. After spawning the actor or the orange, you wanna update the count. So you could say update count. You wanna execute the interface function update count, and then you want to give it the new count, which is this one right here. Basically that would be the new count. You can open the third-person character here and check out how I spawn items and on front of the character, and of course handle everything else. Now, of course, for the other way around, it would be the same thing. For the container one, you would if it's false, obviously it's the orange container, and you will, instead of like get container by ID 0, you will put 1 here and then update the count. So it's pretty much the same thing, it's just a different ID. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. I will be making more in the future. In the meantime, you can check out my example here with all the pickups right here, and you can check out how things are done. But you can always just write me an email, and I will answer whatever question you have. And like I said, I will be making more tutorials, so stay tuned for that. So that's pretty much it. I hope this tutorial was useful, and see you later. Take care.